On August 28th, Paul Berry of Media Watch did a segment on investigative journalist Ross Coulthart regarding his coverage of UFO whistleblower David Grusch. Media Watch is an Australian media analysis and political opinion television program currently presented by Paul Berry. According to Wikipedia, Media Watch is a 15-minute program which identifies, investigates, and examines instances of what the program determines to be failings in news coverage by Australian media outlets. From watching the Coulthart segment, it became immediately clear to me that the show has a deriding tone in what it covers. To give you a quick glimpse of that, here is part of the opening of the Coulthart segment.
Coulthart was presenting a world-exclusive TV interview with David Grusch, the US military whistleblower, who told Congress in July that a top-secret US government program had recovered alien spacecraft and bodies.
Beautifully, though, Ross Coulthart responded to Media Watch's segment, and I found his response letter so important that I wanted to read the entirety of it in a video. Ross is a foremost expert on the intricacies of David Grusch and the allegations he's made. Let's begin. Ross Coulthart's response to Media Watch, August 28th, 2023. Media Watch's questions. 1. Why do you believe David Grusch's congressional testimony when there is no first-hand evidence? 2. Do you believe alien spacecraft have visited Earth? 3. Do you believe the U.S. government has retrieved alien spacecraft and bodies but covered up the evidence? 4. Do you know if an alien spacecraft is secretly held in the U.S., and if so, why not reveal its location? 5. Have you maintained your journalist objectivity in covering David Grusch's claims? Ross Coulthart's response. The tenor of these questions suggests that Media Watch has a preconceived agenda in how it will report this issue. This is because Media Watch's questions are grounded in a false assumption. Media Watch's questions state as a fact that there is no first-hand evidence to support David Grusch's allegations. Contrary to misreporting in some U.S. legacy media, there is first-hand evidence, and it has been presented under oath to the Intelligence Community Inspector General in private hearings. The ICIG is the oversight body for the U.S. intelligence services. I have confirmed this testimony with multiple sources directly, and I have interviewed first-hand witnesses myself directly. The current ICIG, Thomas Monheim, is still preparing his report into Mr. Grusch's allegations, comprising both Grusch's complaint about reprisals against him for being a zealous UAPTF investigator and whistleblower, and also, most importantly, the Inspector General is investigating Mr. Grusch's complaint that there has been a conspiracy within both the U.S. Defense Department and intelligence community and senior executives in private aerospace to illegally conceal a non-human intelligence, NHI, crash retrieval program and reverse engineering program from congressional oversight. As I have confirmed both with Mr. Grusch and congressional sources, the current ICIG was so concerned about Mr. Grusch's allegations after conducting his own investigations that he referred all of them immediately to Congress, deeming all of Grusch's complaints urgent and credible. I emphasize, these ICIG investigations included multiple interviews with first-hand witnesses to the NHI crash retrieval and reverse engineering program known to Mr. Grusch, as well as other evidence. Other first-hand witnesses have also testified to the ICIG who are not known to Mr. Grusch, backing his allegations. For David Grusch or any other witness to reveal such first-hand detail publicly would be a jailable offense because the information is protected by high-level security classifications. he has made clear there is evidence he wishes to disclose from 40-plus witnesses with direct evidence that he collected during his role as an investigator with the UAP task force for the Pentagon. There is also other evidence which he is not able to disclose publicly, but which he has disclosed in secret to the ICIG, which is authorized to receive such sensitive information. I have also confirmed that multiple witnesses have already given evidence under oath in secret to Congress, two powerful intelligence oversight committees, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. I have confirmed directly with congressional sources that this evidence includes multiple direct first-hand witnesses to a still secret and possibly illegal NHI crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. As Congress was told nearly a month ago in the first public hearing into UAPs in 55 years, these witnesses, including whistleblower David Grusch, are not allowed under U.S. secrecy laws to reveal what they know publicly without proper authorization. They want to testify under oath, and multiple senior politicians in both the House and the Senate want that to happen. There is currently a substantial pushback from sections of the intelligence community who do not want this story investigated, and large sections of the U.S. media are complicit in letting historical stigma and ridicule towards UAPs hinder the fact that this is a legitimate story with evidence that demands investigation. It is a measure of just how seriously David Grusch's allegations are being taken that Grusch is represented by lawyer Charles McAuliffe, who served as the original Intelligence Community Inspector General, ICIG. McAuliffe sat right behind his client in the July congressional public hearing because he knows individuals in the U.S. intelligence community and DOD are looking for any opportunity to gag Grusch and other witnesses from revealing what they know by prosecuting him for stepping outside what he has been permitted to discuss within the authority given to him by the DoD's Defense Office of Pre-Publication Security Review, DOPSR. I have also interviewed first-hand witnesses, and several are willing to testify with the proper security protections and non-reprisal assurances about their direct knowledge of an NHI crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. If you refer to pages 280 to 281 of my book, In Plain Sight, you will see that I also interviewed a named first-hand witness, Nats Kobitz, who was read into a secret UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program in his senior R&D role, that's research and development, as then director of the U.S. Navy's Science and Technology Development Office. Kobitz told me he was briefed that the U.S. had recovered multiple NHI craft. On one occasion, he was asked for his expert opinion on a constructed object that he believed was not capable of manufacture using any known terrestrial technology. Kobitz also introduced me to other witnesses from within the U.S. legacy crash retrieval and reverse engineering program who spoke to me in confidence. Some of those original witnesses are among the people now willing to testify under oath to Congress. From the tone of your questions, you appear to errantly assume that much of what is written in U.S. mainstream media on this subject is accurate, for there have been assertions that there is no first-hand evidence presented to support Mr. Grusch's allegations or a lack of credible evidence. Those assertions are wrong. Most media continue to misunderstand and misreport the process still ongoing before secret congressional hearings and inside the ICIG's ongoing investigation. Moreover, as my journalistic colleagues Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal reported in early June, David Grusch's allegations were indeed backed by corroborative insider witnesses. Their article states, quote, "Intelligence officials, both active and retired, with knowledge of these programs through their work in various agencies, have independently provided similar corroborating information, both on and off the record, unquote. This is corroboration of my own experience with first-hand witnesses. Retired Army Carl Nell went on the record to the debrief stating of Grusch, quote, his assertion concerning the existence of a terrestrial arms race occurring sub rosa over the past 80 years, focused on reverse engineering technologies of unknown origin, is fundamentally correct, as is the indisputable realization that at least some of these technologies of unknown origin derived from non-human intelligence, unquote. In the same article, a serving intelligence officer, Jonathan Gray, specializing in UAP analysis at the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, NASIC, stated, quote, a vast array of our most sophisticated sensors, including space-based platforms, have been utilized by different agencies, typically in triplicate, to observe and accurately identify the out-of-this-world nature, performance, and design of these anomalous machines, which are then determined not to be of earthly origin. Your questions make the mistake of asking if I believe that NHI alien craft have been retrieved by the U.S. government and are currently the subject of a secret reverse engineering program. Belief is an expression of religious faith. It is defined as an acceptance that something exists or is true, especially one without proof. So in answer to your question on belief, my belief is irrelevant. It is not the case that there is no proof at all behind Mr. Grusch's allegations, as your questions on belief imply. What I am doing as a journalist is investigating those allegations, and I have verified them, as have other journalists, forming a view on the basis of interviews with multiple corroborative, direct, first-hand witnesses. Like many scientists, senators, congressional representatives, and insider witnesses, I think it is long overdue for this issue to be properly investigated, and Mr. Grusch's allegations should be tested by a formal, public, and well-resourced inquiry. The nature of your negative questions suggests that you are prejudiced by the decades of stigma and ridicule into a view that there is no basis to Mr. Grusch's allegations. Yet even the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, one of the most powerful people in the U.S. Congress, has backed extraordinary legislative amendments that would compel disclosure of NHI, non-human intelligence, and NHI technology held by the U.S. government or private aerospace. Perhaps you should be asking yourself why such a senior senator is referring to a non-human intelligence over 20 times in a bill before Congress. This proposed legislation received the support of much of the bipartisan leadership of some of the most powerful senators in the Congress. What is driving that legislation is a realization among senior congressional leaders that the U.S. Congress has very likely been lied to and misled for decades, as Mr. Grusch alleges. In conclusion, your questions convey an explicit assumption about a lack of first-hand evidence that is totally false. I have set out here the accurate information with little expectation that Media Watch will fairly or accurately report it. The information I have detailed here should give you cause to question your snide inferences in your questions about my objectivity, and perhaps you should be questioning your own objectivity in how you report this story. My response will be posted online so that the millions of people worldwide who want objective coverage of UAPs, including senior congressmen, staffers, and senators, as well as potential whistleblowers, can assess the fairness of the ABC's reporting. There has been a critical failure to date by legacy mainstream media to properly understand or engage with this extraordinarily important story. Ross Coulthart at Ross Coulthart. And this is an asterisk that was referenced earlier in this letter, and I'll go ahead and read it. One recent story by the Washington Post illustrates just how unfairly some of the U.S. mainstream media is misreporting the UAP issue. In an interview on News Nation, I called for an investigation into how the intelligence community attempted to smear whistleblower David Grusch because personal health details of mental health treatment for his PTSD were provided to a journalist. Mr. Grusch is a decorated veteran with distinguished service from his time in Afghanistan. During our vetting of Mr. Grusch for my June News Nation interview, he had freely volunteered in interview that he had suffered PTSD and suicidal ideation after suffering the loss of a close friend and military colleague from suicide. His wife had called police because of her concerns her husband might harm himself in his grief at the loss of his close friend. Grusch knew there were sensitive records held by police recording his PTSD and suicidal ideation and his subsequent transfer to a psychiatric facility for treatment. He also knew that under U.S. HIPAA laws, such files should not be released under FOIA because they contain sensitive private medical information. Earlier this month, Grusch became aware that a web-based publication called The Intercept was preparing a hit piece on him, implying that his PTSD treatment somehow made him an unreliable witness. Such an assertion would be vigorously disputed by his treating doctors and a gross slur on the 20+% of U.S. military veterans who suffer with PTSD. It should be noted that Mr. Grusch had always fully disclosed his PTSD to DoD security, and they had judged there was no basis for his extremely high-level security clearance to be taken from him because of this incident and hospital treatment. Sadly, PTSD is a big issue for many veterans, both here in Australia and the U.S. It is no basis for an assertion that a witness is inherently unreliable. When he became aware of the Intercept story, Mr. Grusch checked with county police, whom his wife had called when he was suffering his PTSD episode at home, and they assured him categorically that there had been no media requests for any files on the incident and none had been provided from their office. He, not unreasonably, concluded that his personal medical information had been leaked from within the intelligence community. It did subsequently emerge that the police who assured Mr. Grusch his files had not been released had either not checked properly or given him false information. Files detailing his PTSD and his transfer to a short-stay psychiatric hospital had been released to the Intercept's reporter under FOIA, an issue that Mr. Grusch still contends was an improper release of his personal medical history under U.S. HIPAA privacy laws. News Nation prominently and expeditiously corrected the facts surrounding where the files originated. However, my expressed concern that Mr. Grusch was smeared by a leak from the intelligence community still stands, because that is demonstrably true. It subsequently emerged that the Intercept reporter boasted in a TV interview that he did in fact receive a tip from sources within the intelligence community that led him to Mr. Grusch's personal medical files held by police. This is now the basis for a complaint by Mr. Grusch that his personal medical history was used by members of the intelligence community in what was ultimately a fruitless attempt to smear him that backfired. The subsequent Washington Post report made much of News Nation's correction, but made no mention of the admission made by the Intercept's reporter that the tip that led him to the documents he used to smear Mr. Grusch came from the intelligence community. It also failed to report that police had given Mr. Grusch false information, which led him to the conclusion the leak came from within the intelligence community. As News Nation told the Washington Post, its story was a, quote, a distraction from a disgusting attempt to discredit a decorated veteran who served in the United States Air Force and suffered from PTSD in a larger effort to minimize News Nation's exclusive reporting on an alleged secret military operation, which has led to a congressional hearing on UFOs. On August 9th, Glenn Beck had accomplished journalist Michael Shellenberger on his show. And at the end of that segment, Michael Shellenberger reveals what probability he gives that the witnesses that have not yet come forward publicly and David Grusch that has come forward publicly are telling the accurate truth regarding a secretive UFO crash retrieval program that has acquired machines of non-human origin.
Yeah.
Gun to your head. I have to ask you, and you've got to respond, gun to your head. Do you tend to believe it or not?
I would say at this point, I'm over 50% that it is non-human craft, and that there's some percentage that it's disinformation and some percentage that it's psychosis, highly selective psychosis. But yeah, so I'm saying over 50% at this point.
So journalists like Michael Schellenberger that we just saw and Ross Coulthart have been sticking their necks out, doing an amazing job covering the UFO issue in general, as well as David Grusch coming forward and other witnesses that have come forward but have not yet done so publicly. And those witnesses claim to be firsthand witnesses and have testified under oath to, it's from my understanding, staffers of the United States Congress, the ICIG, and so forth. So it's not as if them coming forward is irrelevant to their reputation or their careers. It's highly relevant. And there is a lot of evidence building, in my opinion, that there is some ground truth to what is taking place right now. But of course, I do assess that there's no way you could cover this topic without making mistakes. So I'm sure that I know that Ross Coulthart has made mistakes in his journey covering this issue. I'm sure Schellenberger has or will. And the point I want to drive home is, does it really matter? Well, it matters, but they're doing what a lot of people are unwilling to do. And so an imperfect analogy would be if your house, God forbid, was burning and a fireman rescued you, but in the process of rescuing you, you endured some scratches and bruises because the fireman or woman wasn't careful enough in the heat of the moment. Would that be so important if ultimately the fire person saved your life? I don't think it would be. But yet we get caught up in mistakes some of these journalists make when they're covering this topic. But ultimately, they will go down in history as visionaries, as people with a ton of common sense that saw something there and recognized there was a very real probability that there was something there. And they were willing to put their reputation on the line in the name of what I would argue is common sense. And I only believe this goes in one direction. We will ultimately, in my opinion, enter a post-disclosure world. And indeed, I would make the aggressive argument that if there was nothing here, this should have imploded long ago. We should not be 6 years post New York Times, and now we have Chuck Schumer implementing legislation where non-human intelligence is written over 20 times. That should not be happening. There is obviously some kind of infrastructure within the national security apparatus that is telling people this is real. So pick your poison. Could it be a psyop? Sure. Could it be mass psychosis? Sure. Could it be that there's ground truth to this UFO topic and that the United States government has forensic proof we're not alone? That's my choice. But we'll see, because this is inevitably going to solve itself, unless you believe, which I think is absurd, that we're just in a new phase of UFOs and it's never going to solve itself, and the topic is going to remain escalated indefinitely. That's a cop-out, right? That's someone who just doesn't want to admit that there is a degree of objective falsifiability in play. But that's all I got to say. Thank you so much for watching. There's a lot more to come. I'm going to try to make this month very active. I'm going to try to get a lot more videos in. If you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my merch shop where I sell t-shirts. You could become a patron. You could become a YouTube member. You could give me a one-time donation. All those potentialities can be accessed in the description below. Or you could just slap a like on this bad boy, and I will appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Special thanks to all patrons, YouTube members, those that have bought merch, those that have given me one-time donation. I couldn't do without you. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode.